They are extremely personal and they are very intimate. There's a lot of talk about artists using subject matter outside of their personal repertoire or whatever, whereas I've got no problem with using images of my boyfriend or my ex-lover or whatever. It's just there. Like Christopher Isherwood, his writing is very objective, very detached, or Raymond Chandler. But I do like Henry Miller a lot, and his stuff was very personal. These paintings, they're from a kind of vast archive of personal photographs I collected over the years. And they're not organized in any way. They're usually tacked onto the wall or kind of stagnating in a pile, in a heap in the corner of the studio. And that's quite important because I think the best selections are made not through methodically going through an album, but actually through having a kind of physical relationship to them. So if I do a drawing, the first thing I draw isn't the image, it's the frame. So subconsciously I'm drawing the photograph as an object, not just as an image. So people are very critical of paintings being so obviously derived from photos, but for me it's a kind of like a kind of armature or anchor to kind of make a painting that's authentic for me. I think, for a lot of personal reasons, I think since childhood, a lot of stuff happened that imploded, and for me, photographs were a way of remembering times that things perhaps were more structured. So photo albums for me and my brother are a way of retaining the good times. It's forgetting and remembering simultaneously, if that makes sense. Well, for me, a photograph is it's quite melancholy because you're looking at a memory, you're looking at a time-based image, and all my personal images, I could just say, oh, that was 20 years ago, this was 10, this was yesterday, and I'm so conscious of time, and I think once you paint, like this painting of Jason asleep and this painting of a hotel room, there's a 30-year gap between them, but they both exist in the present tense. Painting is like an opportunity to really look at something, someone, to encounter colors that perhaps you would never even consider using. You think of color in terms of cadmium orange or fluorescent green, and they're both great colors, but actually used in abundance, they kind of cancel each other out. So I quite like the idea of finding a photograph and then mixing up a color based on some of those images, and you kind of end up with this weird pus-colored tone that you would never even have thought of using. Skin can just be not just white mixed with burnt umber, ochre and orange and red and a bit of blue to dampen it, you sort of end up with tones that you never would have used before. So I can spend a whole morning just mixing up tones and using the photograph as a kind of test. So by the end of the session, the photograph is just covered with blotches of paint because I kind of destroy the photograph in the process. Well, my paintings use light because it animates the subject, but it also, for me, it's very instinctive. I don't know why. Ever since I was young, my first camera, I would just shoot light. I have no idea why. No, maybe it's because I grew up in Sweden and Canada, two countries where there's seasons. So when you're coming out of winter and the sun's, it's a big deal for a child. And then you move to a country like England where there's just this grey diffuse light. It's like the ceiling's coming down on you. It's not a nice thing. It's a beautiful thing. It animates an interior, a person. I mean, you think about the front cover of Patti Smith's Horses. That was shot by Mapplethorpe, and apparently he really wanted her to stand next to this wall where the light hit not her but the wall, and it makes the image. It's a beautiful image. I'd lost my gallery around 2006, 2007, and I was kind of in a no man's land where I had no audience, and I was still painting, but just trying to work through things. Not just the language of painting, but also what is my subject matter? Is it just the paint? Or is it this thing I'm interested in? Because I was interested in a lot of things, but it was just so overwhelming that I never really had the confidence to use all these photographs I was acquiring. So when I was diagnosed in 2016 with lymphoma, I was kind of still in shock. I just went back to the studio and instinctively made a photograph of my ex-partner, Jason, lighting a cigarette. Just a small little painting like that. Gridded it up, transferred the image and painted it. And that was a kind of starting point for me, how to make a painting, how to construct an image and get lost in the process whilst acknowledging the history of the image. I think I was very conscious after being diagnosed about the idea of permanence, and perhaps there isn't any, and yet these photographs, they show a kind of moment. But because they were so intimate, I perhaps felt a bit embarrassed about that. I always felt I should be painting something that has a kind of content that perhaps everyone can hook into. Strong subject matter relating to current affairs. How old was I? I was 46. So a midlife crisis for some people is getting their ear pierced or getting a Harley Davidson, and mine was getting sick and then rediscovering, or acknowledging the fact that I had this history and it's gone. And I need to celebrate this, but in a way that's not purposely mournful, or in a kind of performative way of, this is, I want it to be as very kind of quiet as possible, not to shout, but perhaps to whisper. Because I really love painters who are quite loud in terms of color and application. I think it's really great. I just can't do that. I tried really hard to do that, but I think when you try to do something, it somehow really shows. But I think being faced with a lot of serious things like health or mortality, I realized that perhaps painting is the best medium for me as a means of forgetting about being in a moment, present tense, as opposed to just always looking to the past. I think painting is primarily a surface, isn't it? It's a bit like the difference between listening to vinyl record and the digital format. So when you listen to a record, you're listening not only to the music that's being recorded, but you're listening to a surface, the needle, the stylus going across the vinyl. So the more you play that record, you're just going to get cracks and scratches, but you still get the best mixtapes are the ones that are 20 years old and there's a real warmth. And it's crazy because you're just listening to, I don't know, an old Neil Young cassette and you think, God, this sounds amazing. And it's not me romanticizing analog, it's just the fact that you're listening to a worn out format that, for me, connects to the human aspect of living.